Good morning, everybody. Um, I'm assuming you are at home right now because it is outside in some places is an icy death trap. So obviously we had to cancel service this morning. Um, didn't want anybody to be coming out in that weather. I can't. I mean, I can't imagine anybody would have anyway. But you never know. Um, so I just kind of wanted to share some thoughts since we aren't going to be having our service today. And I wanted to share some things from Psalm 63, one of my favorite Psalms. As I was thinking about things to share right now, this Psalm really kind of immediately popped in my head because it's really it illustrates how we should feel about God. And I think also how we should feel about um, uh, coming to the Lord's house to worship together. So Psalm 63, and I'm just going to I'm not going to go over the whole Psalm, most of it. Um, but your Bible probably has like a little heading that says a Psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. So this is a time when David was in the wilderness. He um, he was driven there. There was two times in his life where he kind of had to go to the wilderness. The first time was Saul was trying to kill him, and the second time was when his own son was trying to kill him. So not good situation. So he's he's writing this from a perspective of he's in the wilderness. He is not excuse me. He's not at home. He's not near the temple or the tabernacle. Rather, he's not he's not close to any of that. And he writes this psalm about what's in his heart. And so if you were a king and you were driven into the wilderness by circumstances outside of yourself, um, what would you want? What would you desire? You'd probably be like, oh man, I wish I could be back in my palace right now. I had a really nice bed. I wish there was great food there. I have a private chef, and it's just so great. So you'd probably be thinking about all the amenities that you have at home, and things like that. And those might be the things that you'd miss if you were in the wilderness. But in this psalm, David doesn't say any of that. He doesn't say that he misses his palace. He doesn't say he misses, the food. He doesn't say he misses his bed or anything like that. What he says, "Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you as in a dry and weary land where there is no water." So, as David's in the wilderness, he's expressing the longing of his heart, and the longing of his heart is God. He wants to be with God. He wants to hear God's voice. He wants to be in His presence, and he's just it's just my soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So if you can think of, if you were in a desert land and there was no water, you'd be so thirsty you couldn't stand it. And David is basically saying that's how much I want God. I have to be with God. I have to have intimacy with God. That to David was more. It's interesting. He wasn't driven by a sense of duty, right? It wasn't like, well, I want to be with God because I'm supposed to be with God, or something like that. It was all. It was simply that's what he wanted. He wanted God. He found God more satisfying than anything else. And I read this psalm sometimes, and I just kind of think and pray that, like, I want to feel this way. I want to be able to say this to God. I want to be able to say to God, my soul thirsts for you, like I'm in a desert land and I need water. I want to feel that way. And you either feel that way or you don't. That's the bottom line. And so as I'm talking about this, how do you feel about God? Um, do you desire? Do you long to be with God? Is there something else in life that you'd rather be with than God? But here's what's interesting. So he talks about his hunger for God, and then verse 2 he says, so I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory. So basically what he's saying is, my soul thirsts for you as it has when I'm in your sanctuary. That's what David is saying. So what David is doing is he's reminiscing, he's remembering being in the tabernacle. And he says, as I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory. So what David is doing, he's thinking about being in the house of God. He's thinking about the times he's been in the sanctuary of God, and he just is in front of the power and the glory of God. And when he thinks about beholding the power and glory of God, he wants to be there again, as if he's in a desert land and he's wanting water. And so, do we feel that way about coming to the house of God? Is that do we feel that way on Sunday mornings? Do we think like, man, I want to go to church and behold the power and glory of God? Is that how we feel? And I mean, the other question that I think every church should ask is, do we have the power and glory of God in our church? Because a lot of churches don't have the power and glory of God. Just because you build a building and put a steeple on it does not mean God is going to show up at all. And so that's the first thing we have to do. We have to make sure, okay, is the power and glory of God in our church? And the only way the power and glory of God is going to be in our church is if we are obedient to God and we are surrendered to him, and we are completely focused on his desires and his will. If we come to church but we're self-centered and we just want what we want and we think our way is the best way and all that stuff, there's no room for God. If we have self-centered mindsets, then there's no room for God in church. So that's the first thing. So once that's taken care of, where we are surrendered to God and we're seeking him, we're being obedient to him, we're calling on his name. When we get that down, do we want to be in his presence? Like David, do we think about being in the sanctuary of God, worshiping God corporately, beholding his power and glory? Do we think about that? And do we want that? And do we want that more than anything else? Because I already said it. Either you do or you don't. And if we don't feel this way about God, if we don't long for him, if we don't desire to behold his power and glory, then there's something wrong with our hearts. There's something going on there. It doesn't mean you're not a Christian. Every Christian has those dry seasons. Every Christian we all go through those ebbs and flows. Those dark times, those difficult seasons. But does it bother us when we don't long for God the way that we should? Does that bother us? Or do we not care? Do we just really not care? Could we just, and so, and then David says, why? In verse 3, he says, because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. Your steadfast love is better than life. There's nothing more to say. David experienced the power, the glory, and the love of God, and he said that the love of God is better than life. And that's all he wanted. Nothing could satisfy him more than God. Nothing could replace God. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name, I will lift up my hands. And then verses 5 and 6 are some of my favorite verses. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips when I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. When I remember you upon my bed, when I meditate on you at nighttime, my soul will be satisfied like I'm eating the most delicious food. So it wasn't just in the sanctuary where David experienced the presence of God. It was on his bed as he was falling asleep, thinking about God and just and longing for him and experiencing his presence, and it was more satisfying than anything. I mean, does this reflect us? When's the last time you sat in your living room at night and just thought about God and just meditated on him and had and experienced his presence and experienced the supreme satisfying presence of God? When's the last? It's and what this shows is that for David, God was life. There was nothing more important to him than life. There was nothing he wanted more than God. Nothing was more important to him than God in his life. There was nothing he wanted more than God. There's nothing that would satisfy him other than God. We live in a day and age where everything satisfies us except God. We have food, we have entertainment, we have all sorts of things that we go to for joy instead of God. But the thing is, every single joy outside of God it's a counterfeit joy. It's not real. It will never satisfy. God alone. And if we find ourselves being satisfied in things other than God, then that's not that number one, we're missing out. We are missing out on real joy by not finding it in God. And number two, that means that there's something wrong with our heart. If we don't find God supremely satisfying here on earth, we're going to be miserable in heaven. We're going to be miserable. And we were created so that nothing can satisfy us other than God. Nothing can. No, every human being will only find their real, true satisfaction in God alone. Everybody. In verse 7, David says, "For you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me." So, So as David is in the wilderness, all he thinks about is being in the sanctuary of God. He thinks about experiencing God's presence in the evening, and there's nothing he wants more than to get back in the presence of God, to experience that soul satisfying intimacy that only God can give. Psalm 16:11, David also said, "In your presence is fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore." Fullness of joy, which means nothing can be more joyful. Pleasures forevermore. It'll never end. So in God is the most joy you could ever experience, and it's forever. It never ends. And so, let's just, I don't know, meditate on God today. Meditate on God tonight. Let's seek to feel this way about God, to have our hearts so changed by the Holy Spirit that we feel the same way about God that David does.